What exactly the Illuminati is, because the definition has changed over the years. Originally, the Illuminati referred to the Bavarian Illuminati, a confirmed secret society that did in fact operate between the years 1776 and 1785. The organization was founded by a German law professor who believed strongly in Enlightenment practices, and it was composed of like-minded individuals. Together, the men of the Bavarian Illuminati, many of whom held positions of power within their society, worked together to spread their beliefs and influence politics. Originally, the group was comprised of just 6 to 9 men, but they had big dreams, and they really did want to take over the world, which was proved in some of the writings of former members. On record, at its peak, the organization had somewhere between 650 to 2,500 members, many of which were known to infiltrate other organizations in order to recruit individuals to join their secret society. As far as official history is concerned, however, the group disbanded sometime in the 1780s, but personally, I'm not so sure. Today we see a different version of the Illuminati, kind of shrouded in satanic symbols and celebrity influence.
But are the Illuminati even human, or at least all human? Some people don't think so. Since around the late 70s, extraterrestrial beings have been brought into the New World Order conspiracies. The idea is that beings from other planets or parallel dimensions, like the classic Greys, play a big part in controlling and shaping our world. Stan Deyo, Milton, William Cooper, and David Icke talk about alien conspiracies a lot. The movie They Live is basically this idea brought to the big screen. The idea that aliens have infiltrated everything from politics to advertising and have been involved in brainwashing us since who knows when. Some think that since the dawn of time aliens have been around. And what's the end goal? Well, maintaining power, or they're in the final stages of their plan to reveal themselves and just outright enslave us all. There's also a less extreme idea that those at the top, aka the Illuminati, just work alongside extraterrestrial beings, which is all hidden from the public by a government cover-up enforced by Men in Black type agents working in these covert government agencies, which has sometimes been referred to as Majestic 12. This agency collaborates with alien occupation, allowing alien abductions in exchange for assistance in developing advanced military technology tested at places like Area 51.
Next up, let's talk about the Illuminati's drive and ability to control the world. Whether or not the Illuminati still exists, the Bavarian Illuminati did, as I said, an incredibly good job at influencing society, probably because it was made up of many dukes and other leaders, as well as authors and well-respected members of society. The Bavarian Illuminati promoted the idea of free thinking and liberation from both religious and political oppression, bringing forth a new wave of societal ideals that gravitated away from the Catholic Church rather than towards it, which is likely why many people believe that the organization found its roots in Satanism, and why today so many people associate the use of satanic images and symbols with the group. If the Illuminati does still exist, there are two possible options. Well, really there are endless possibilities, but these two seem like the most likely one. The Bavarian Illuminati is just as it has always been, rooted in beliefs of enlightenment and free thinking, composed of people with relatively good intentions and the power to spread those beliefs in both social and political sectors. Or two, it has evolved to include many malevolent players who now use the group's influence to promote a darker ideology and belief system that is centered around lack of individuality, identity crises, and consumerism, which distract us as a society from taking a critical look at the real issues, such as the growing divide between the lower and upper class. So is it a good group gone bad? Is it a group that no longer exists? I don't know. If you know, let me know.
So I brought up how aliens could be assisting the Illuminati in developing highly advanced technology, but there's another aspect to the whole technology thing, that they also suppress advanced technology, keeping it from being used by the general public. Stuff that would benefit society is intentionally withheld to maintain the status quo, only being used by the top 1%. This could include advancements in renewable energy, medical treatments, the list goes on. Powerful groups like the Illuminati could also be actively suppressing technology that could enhance personal freedoms and undermine surveillance and control, like encryption tools. I mean, this is really dark, but there is some logic to this, especially when it comes to the idea of suppressing advanced medicine. I mean, what better way to control people than by keeping them sick, right? If you have a population that's too happy and too healthy, they're less reliant on you.
So at the beginning of today's video, we talked a bit about how the Bavarian Illuminati had a propensity for infiltrating other organizations in an effort to recruit new members into their own group. Well, one of the main organizations infiltrated by the Bavarian Illuminati were actually the Freemasons, another tight-knit influential group made up of powerful, wealthy men living under the umbrella of a secret society with a lot of speculation. And so subsequently many members of the Bavarian Illuminati, or BI if you will, just so happened to be former Freemasons or former members of other similar organizations. Becoming a member of the BI wasn't something a person could simply sign up for. It was more like a recruitment process. Today, if the group still exists, the process would likely be the same, but it is unlikely that the organization would be recruiting reckless celebrities and influencers. Why? Well, because it goes against pretty much everything the secret society stands for, which is quiet and purposeful influence that promotes enlightened, free thinking. Most likely members of the organization, should it stand today, would include political leaders, bank owners, and maybe a few level-headed celebrities, if those even exist. In general, the celebrities we see using this satanic and eyeball imagery that we as a society have chosen to associate with the Illuminati organization are doing so as a way to create an air of mystery in order to garner attention for themselves and likely to troll the general public. And who knows, maybe some of them are Satanists, but whether or not that has anything to do with the Illuminati, I don't know. Also, this is not sponsored by the Illuminati, just in case you're wondering.
So I talked about the Illuminati suppressing technology and medicine in order to maintain control, and many think that this could also involve the food industry. I mean, dear God, the amount of conflicting info we hear about foods that cause cancer, foods that don't. This diet is the healthiest. No, this one is. This one food is slowly killing you, so you gotta eat this. There's like so much contradictory, confusing noise out there when it comes to nutrition. No wonder we have an obesity crisis on our hands. And is it possible things are made to be intentionally confusing? I mean, maybe. I'm not gonna even blame the experts or fitness influencers themselves either. I mean, they're just relaying what they've been told. At the end of the day, nutrition is way simpler than it often seems, with the countless articles and videos and news stories that really seem to be made in order to keep people in the dark about how to actually get healthy.
Next, we have the theory that the modern day branch of the Bavarian Illuminati, or whatever the organization has mutated into, is in global control of the world's financial institutions, which isn't hard to believe if you're already on board with the idea that 1. The Illuminati exists, and 2. Its members are some of the most wealthy individuals, including bank owners. I mean, it just makes sense, and it's really not that far-fetched either. Why wouldn't the world's elite band together to control finances as they see fit? Is it right? Probably not, but is it likely? Maybe. Many people believe that the Rothschilds, a wealthy banking family, are in fact members of the Illuminati, and that they control the City of London, the US Federal Reserve, and most of mainstream media. I mean, we know propaganda exists, and we know that some reporters aren't above taking bribes. All of the pieces are technically in place for both this organization and its control over global finances to exist. There's no question. The only question is, did they take those pieces and run with it?
So what if the Illuminati aren't human nor extraterrestrial? What if they're actually creatures from deep below the earth? Reptilians. Yes, the theory is that a bunch of shape-shifting reptilian humanoids known as reptilians control the earth and manipulate human affairs for their own gain. These reptile creatures can take on human form in order to blend in and work in powerful positions in governments or corporations, so they have quite the resume. Some people even think a lot of celebrities are just reptilians wearing skin suits, so they got some talent. Again, their ultimate goal is to establish a totalitarian new world order where they have absolute control over humanity. But where do these scaly menaces actually come from? below the Earth's surface. Reptilians are often part of the hollow Earth theory, living in dark caverns beneath the Earth, and advanced technological societies with shape-shifting technology, of course, then crawling out of their hellish pits before assuming the form of an old, wrinkly politician or a hot celebrity.
Next up, we have the theory that the Illuminati not only influences people, but if necessary, they take them out. Many people believe that the Illuminati is responsible for a countless number of deaths of global key figures, including the deaths of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and even Princess Diana. Why? Well, likely because they oppose the modern-day Illuminati's idea of the perfect world order, and they had enough influence to create a change which members of the organization were not interested in letting happen. It is believed that Illuminati members sitting in some of the highest positions of power have used that power to orchestrate the deaths of anyone, really, who they believed was a threat to the organization, and to the way the organization has brainwashed the public into behaving. Again, it's possible, but for my own safety, I'm gonna go ahead and say it's probably not true. And if you're the Illuminati watching this, it's definitely not true, okay? This entire video is just a joke. Don't hurt me.
And finally, we have the end times. We've talked about a number of possible end goals for the Illuminati, but the darkest one has to be this: that the Illuminati are attempting to fulfill an end times prophecy. So they're basically like a team of Power Ranger villains or Dr. Evil. I've never really understood the evil villains in movies who just wanted to destroy the planet. Like, I get wanting to control it, but destroying it? Like, what are you gonna do after that? Anyway, end times prophecies get tangled up with the Illuminati conspiracy theories quite a bit. The gist is that the Illuminati are pulling the strings behind the scenes to make an end times prophecy come to fruition. We've already mentioned satanic stuff a bit. Maybe that's part of it. There are a lot of conspiracies that involve the Illuminati practicing dark rituals or human sacrifices. All the wars, the economic disasters, the social chaos, it's all to bring about the end times, apparently. I mean, I hope not. I get wanting to control the Earth. I mean, you think if I had enough power, I'd be controlling the Earth. I'd be helping people too, but I'd have like 9 cars, I'd have supermodels around me all the time, I'd have multiple houses, I'd have McDonald's in my house, like Richie Rich.
Starting off our list today with the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Back in the 1930s, Americans had a sneaking suspicion that their government was partaking in some less than ethical medical experimentation on men of color. At the time, those who believed the suspicions were called crazy, but as it turns out, they were actually right. In 1932, the United States Public Health Service worked side by side with the Tuskegee Institute to create a fake syphilis treatment program for black men, in which unethical experimental practices were used to determine the different effects of syphilis on the human body. For 40 years, 400 men were given dangerous chemicals and unnecessary medical procedures, being passed off as legitimate treatment methods, even after penicillin was determined to cure the ailment. In 1974, the practices of the United States Public Health Service were revealed, and a class action lawsuit was brought about. In the end, the suit was settled out of court for $10 million and a lifetime of health benefits being awarded to the surviving participants of the experiment.
There are real facilities in places all over the world, mostly in the United States, where problem youth are taken to. These places are referred to as behavior modification facilities. The thing is, some of the stuff that goes on in these places is just plain illegal, but it's all hidden behind a guise of positivity and growth. In reality, some of these places are worse than jail. Former quote-unquote students have come out of these places with really disturbing stories of the suffering they went through in places like Ivy Ridge, which was the subject of a recent Netflix documentary. Here, students weren't allowed to speak, they constantly had to walk in single file, they weren't allowed to look out the window. They were under constant, highly strict supervision and had this gigantic list of just insane rules that they had to adhere to. So long and ridiculous was this list, it was just impossible to keep track of what was allowed and what wasn't. I mean, really, you can't look out the window? If a rule was broken, by the way, they'd lose points, keeping them trapped in the program for longer. They'd have to rack up a certain number of points in order to make it up throughout levels and eventually leave. Some would be trapped in the facility for years, All their letters to their parents, by the way, were monitored, and if they spoke badly of the program, they'd lose more points. Beatings were also common, especially in the boys' section of the facility. There are still said to be places like this operating today. All the stuff I just mentioned was happening in the mid-2000s. It's just very, very disturbing.
Next up, we have the conspiracy theory that the government secretly funded the Tibetan resistance against China and paid an impressive 7-figure salary to the Dalai Lama during the same time period. Well, obviously it's on this list, so the theory was correct. Over the course of several years, the United States actually paid the Dalai Lama $180 million in an effort to aid the Tibetan resistance. In a declassified document, the organization responsible for overseeing the payments said that the purpose of the program was to keep the political concept of an autonomous Tibet alive, both within Tibet and among foreign nations, mainly India, in order to build capability for resistance against possible political developments inside of communist China.
Here's one that really shouldn't come as much of a shock. The government is tracking you online. I know. Wild. So we all kind of know this happens already, but it's the extent we're not too sure about. We know that our search history and stuff is sold to companies. That's why you'll get ads popping up that are just a little too specific to be coincidental, but the government has its eyes on us as well. In 2016, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or the EFF, which is an organization that sets out to defend civil liberties in the digital realm, well, they reported that various government agencies sent out tons of requests to various websites for user data. They sent 49,868 requests to Facebook, 85% of which were granted, by the way. 27,850 requests were sent to Google, 9,076 to Apple. As for what they're doing with all that stuff, who knows, but it's definitely unsettling. Real privacy is hard to come by these days.
Next up, we have the theory that society's elites have banded together to form some kind of secret society that consists of yearly gatherings and strange rituals worshipping some kind of giant stone owl creature. Well, believe it or not, this is true, but it's not the Illuminati. More on that later, of course. It's actually the men of the Bohemian Grove Club, which was formed in 1872. Each year, members of the club, aka the rich and powerful elites of the world, come together for a 2-week retreat in California, during which time they spend their time enjoying the outdoors, listening to music, and taking in the theater. Oh, and paying their respects to the club's mascot, a giant stone owl. Confirmed members of the club have included both Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, who attended the retreat just prior to their presidencies. The Bohemian Club is also where the idea for the atomic bomb was first conceptualized back in 1942. For this one, I kind of feel like it's a you get what you get kind of situation in terms of information. I mean, they admitted to coming up with the idea for the world's most destructive weapon there, so I'm guessing there's a lot more routine happenings than just enjoying the sunshine and letting loose, but I doubt we'll ever know.
During Woodrow Wilson's presidency, there was a time where some were starting to wonder if someone else was pulling the strings, a secret president behind the scenes, and it turns out there kinda was. His wife, Edith Wilson, who some do refer to as the first female president of the United States, just not officially. President Wilson had suffered a stroke that left him unable to carry out his duties, but the government chose to keep the extent of his condition hidden from the public. During the months following the stroke, Edith Wilson assumed a more active role in the decision-making within the White House, but she claimed to act only as a steward of her husband's presidency. There were conspiracy theories that Edith Wilson was secretly running the country while her husband was incapacitated, and it turns out she actually did take on the responsibilities of the president for over a year. At one time in history, people in the Western world were shocked to learn that the big hairy monsters they'd only heard about in myths and legends actually turned out to exist. It's kind of hard to believe it, but gorillas were considered cryptids at one point, at least in the West. We didn't know they really existed until 1847 when bones were found in Liberia. In the grand scheme of things, that's really not that long ago. Photography had been invented over 20 years before. Imagine hearing stories about big, hairy, humanoid-looking creatures with 10 times the strength of humans. You'd think they were monsters. It would be like seeing an actual Bigfoot carcass and learning that they really are families of Sasquatch roaming through the forests in the US and Canada. It's just kind of crazy to think about.
Tucked away in the shadows of the Cold War, the Zeljava Air Base, also known by its codename Object 505, stands as a monument to the power and paranoia of the era. This gargantuan underground complex wasn't just any military base, it was one of Yugoslavia's largest and most costly defense projects designed to endure a nuclear onslaught. Over 2 decades, billions were poured into constructing this fortress that sprawled beneath the mountains, equipped with advanced technology and ample space to shelter a significant portion of the Yugoslav Air Force. However, as the Croatian War of Independence erupted in 1991, the Yugoslav People's Army took drastic measures. Rather than let this strategic asset fall into enemy hands, they chose to obliterate it. This systematic destruction was thorough, runways blown apart, tunnels sealed, and command centers reduced to rubble. The base's mysterious and its secretive past have ignited a myriad of conspiracy theories. Some insist it was a covert nuclear arsenal hiding warheads under the guise of an airbase, with whispers that these weapons were secretly whisked away or still lurk in the labyrinthine ruins. Others speculate about the extensive network of tunnels rumored to stretch far beyond the base, perhaps connecting to other clandestine sites or serving as hidden conduits for VIPs needing a quick escape. Adding an extraterrestrial twist, the base's high-tech radar installations are said to have drawn the eyes, and possibly more, of curious alien visitors. Reports of UFO sightings in the area have only fueled speculation that Zeljava was not just a military hub, but a hotspot for otherworldly research. Next, we are talking about the Balaklava submarine base in Ukraine. Nestled in an isolated cove, this Cold War relic was a fortress of mystery, originally designed to repair and house Soviet submarines away from prying eyes. With its network of tunnels and armored doors capable of withstanding nuclear blasts, the base's formidable architecture and secretive operations have ignited imaginations, to say the least. Some suggest that even after its official decommissioning, the base may have secretly operated under the Russian government's radar. It's believed that submerged beneath the Black Sea's waves, the base could have been the staging ground for spy missions, covert intelligence operations, or even sabotage campaigns. Others theorize that its secluded watery depths made it an ideal spot for testing new, undisclosed weapons, technologies like torpedoes or experimental submarines. The labyrinthine tunnels could very well serve as a vault for storing top-secret documents, cutting-edge tech, or even undisclosed materials. Some conspiracy theorists take a deep dive into the fantastical. They imagine the base as an underwater layer for extraterrestrial liaisons, theorizing it was constructed with the aid of aliens to serve as a covert hub for interstellar research or as a meeting point for human and alien leaders. Others speculate it was a doomsday bunker prepared to shelter the Soviet elite from nuclear fallout or other cataclysms, poised to emerge post-apocalypse to rebuild civilization. And perhaps the most outlandish of all, if this wasn't enough, some believe the base's nuclear capabilities might have been used for audacious experiments in time travel, potentially opening portals to other times or dimensions. The Belitz Heilstatten was a massive hospital complex in Germany, originally built at the end of the 19th century to treat tuberculosis patients, and it was morphed into a critical military hospital during both World Wars. After the dust of World War II settled, the Soviets took over, utilizing it until the early 1990s. As the walls of this historic site were left to crumble, eerie stories began to fill the void. The creepiest of these conspiracy theories suggest that during its time as a military hospital, it was the scene of secret medical experiments. Rumors of horrific surgical trials and psychological tests overshadow its legitimate medical history. Some say the spirits of soldiers tormented by their wartime injuries, and others victims of the brutal regime roam the hallways. These ghostly ghostly whispers and stories of dark experiments have turned the now abandoned hospital into a favorite haunt for both thrill seekers and paranormal investigators, all drawn in by its somber and spooky allure. Fort Terry on Plum Island, nestled off the coast of Long Island, New York, has become a hotbed for spine-tingling conspiracy theories, often fueled by the secretive operations of the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, or PIADC, which was established there after the fort's decommissioning. This isolated location, shrouded in mystery, is notorious for its rumored involvement in biological weapons research, with the most chilling theory suggesting that experiments with ticks and pathogens meant for warfare led to the accidental creation and release of Lyme disease. According to whispers among conspiracy enthusiasts, a genetically modified tick carrying the Lyme bacteria managed to escape the island, sparking the initial outbreak in the nearby Lyme, Connecticut. But the tales don't stop there. Some suggest that the facility dabbled in creating grotesque animal-human hybrids, merging DNA for sinister, undisclosed purposes. Even wilder are claims of alien autopsies conducted in the labs where extraterrestrial beings from UFO crashes were supposedly examined. And, like any good conspiracy, there's always the belief in a vast government cover-up, with claims that the feds are keeping a tight lid on the truly dangerous experiments conducted at PIADC. Nestled in the heart of Germany, the Wunsdorf Soviet camp, dubbed Little Moscow, tells a tale of historical significance and shadowy mystery. During the tense years of the Cold War, this sprawling military complex served as the nerve center for the Soviet forces stationed in Germany. A bustling, self-contained mini-city, Wunsdorf had everything from residential buildings and schools to hospitals and theater, catering to the daily lives of thousands of soldiers and their families. However, the real intrigue begins with the eerie conspiracy theories that linger around the now abandoned base. One of the most pervasive theories is that beneath the decaying facade lies a labyrinth of hidden tunnels and bunkers. These secret passageways are rumored to have been used for everything from secret operations and emergency evacuations to stashing forbidden weapons and futuristic technology. Another chilling speculation is that Wunsdorf was a hotbed for clandestine research, with whispers of experiments ranging from biological warfare and mind control techniques to groundbreaking military tech. Lastly, legends of hidden treasures, leftover valuables from the Soviet era, or war spoils secreted away, have tantalized treasure hunters who scour the grounds hoping to uncover hidden riches. Nestled off the coast of Albania, Sazan Island, with its eerie abandoned military base, seems plucked straight from a spy novel. Throughout its tumultuous history, the island has been a strategic military asset controlled by Italy, the Soviet Union, and Albania. During the Cold War, under the iron grip of Albania's communist leader Enver Hoxha, Sazan was transformed into a fortress. It boasted an extensive network of tunnels, bunkers, and underground facilities, making it virtually impenetrable and intensely mysterious. One popular theory suggests that Sazan was a center for the dark arts of warfare, specifically the development of biological and chemical weapons. Its isolation and the government's tight-lipped nature only added fuel to these chilling speculations. Others whisper that it served as a covert submarine base, utilizing its strategic location and deep surrounding waters. Darker still are the rumors that it was actually a prison and torment facility where political dissidents were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Some even believe the island's labyrinth of tunnels hide treasures, looted riches, or relics left by former rulers. Camp Hero State Park, located in Montauk, New York, holds a fascinating slice of Cold War history, originally serving as a radar station that played a critical role in America's national defense. Today, this park is not only a serene getaway with a picturesque ocean view, but also the epicenter of some of the creepiest conspiracies you'll hear. The most notorious of these is the Montauk Project, which has taken on a life of its own in the world of supernatural lore. According to enthusiasts and speculators, under the guise of national defense during the mid-20th century, the government secretly engaged in wild scientific experiments right here. We're talking time travel, teleportation, and mind control, and even making contact with extraterrestrial beings. Imagine walking through the same grounds where, if the theories were to be believed, scientists might have ripped through the fabric of time or whispered to aliens. Adding to the spooky ambiance are reports of unexplained lights zipping across the sky, unusual weather patterns that defy logical explanation, and tales of people who went into the base and never came out quite the same, or at all. The Monsell sea forts in the United Kingdom are a striking example of wartime ingenuity turned eerie relic. Constructed during World War II, these offshore platforms were initially erected in the Thames and the Mersey estuaries to fend off German air raids. Positioned far from the mainland, their primary role was to intercept aircraft and deter enemy engagements before they could reach critical urban areas. After the war, many of these forts were decommissioned and left to the mercy of the sea, gradually succumbing to rust and the elements. However, their isolation and formidable appearance have sparked a series of chilling conspiracy theories. Some believe these now abandoned forts were not just military outposts, but served darker purposes. Whispered rumors suggest they might have housed covert operations or acted as secret laboratories for the research and development of biological or chemical weapons. Despite their real and somewhat mundane military history, the legends that have grown around these sea forts make them a fascinating and spooky chapter of British wartime defense. Fort Ord in California, once a buzzing army base teeming with soldiers, now holds a quieter, more mysterious allure since its partial abandonment in 1994. During its heyday throughout most of the 20th century, Fort Ord was a vital training ground for military personnel, playing a significant role, particularly during World War II and the Vietnam War. However, as the years rolled on and its strategic importance dwindled, parts of it were left to the whispers of the wind and the rumors of those who pass its empty structures. Today, Fort Ord's eerie, deserted buildings and overgrown vegetation fuel creepy conspiracy theories that captivate the curious. Tales of hidden underground tunnels and secret facilities weave through local lore, suggesting that beneath the surface lies a maze of passages used for undisclosed, possibly nefarious activities. Adding to the base's ghostly ambiance are reports of spectral soldiers, apparitions in uniform, perhaps remnants of its bustling past, who are said to roam the old barracks and training fields. These ghostly figures, spotted in the shadows or the fleeting corner of an observer's eye, contribute to a chilling narrative that Fort Ord is a place where the line between the historical and the supernatural blurs. And finally on our list today, we are talking about the Titan I missile complex. A 57-acre expanse in rural eastern Washington, it is steeped in the kind of Cold War secrecy that naturally breeds conspiracy theories. Buried 155 feet underground, its massive silos, once armed with nuclear-tipped Titan I rockets, are a testament to an era riddled with paranoia and mistrust. The Titan I program was inherently secretive, a necessity given its strategic importance during the Cold War. Numerous accidents and near misses, such as fuel leaks and accidental launches, sometimes even culminating in explosions, add a darker hue to the narrative. These mishaps could be easily misconstrued as evidence of either cover-ups or perhaps even sabotage. The underground silos themselves invite the most intrigue. Shrouded beneath the earth, these complexes were equipped with extensive facilities including their own water treatment systems and provisions for long-term habitation. Such elaborate preparations, while practical for military needs, have led some to speculate about hidden chambers or secret technologies possibly concealed within these depths. All of this was only fueled by the rapid decommissioning of the Titan I missiles, replaced by the more advanced Titan II system. This swift phase-out could suggest that there were some unspoken flaws or vulnerabilities that needed urgent rectification, kept out of public eye. Environmental concerns also loom large, with the use of toxic fuels at these sites raising fears of long-term contamination and health effects, another potential fodder for conspiracy theories. Pop culture has definitely not been shy about tapping into this well of mysteries, often portraying the Titan I program with a mix of intrigue and foreboding, further cementing its place in the public imagination as a hotbed for conspiracies.
Were former members and even high-ranking members of the Third Reich ever involved in scientific research in the United States? after the Second World War? Well, surprisingly, yes. It was all part of Operation Paperclip. This was a covert program conducted by the United States after the Second World War to recruit German scientists, engineers, and technicians, particularly those involved in rocketry, aerospace, and intelligence work. They wanted to bring these experts to America and then use them for their knowledge and expertise, while also preventing them from falling into the hands of the Soviet Union during the emerging Cold War. These scientists were offered immunity and security clearances in exchange for their cooperation and relocation to the US, but some stuff ended up getting swept under the rug. You see, President Truman agreed to the program, but only under specific conditions. The scientists couldn't have been members of that party. But some scientists were just too smart to pass up, even with their involvement in the Third Reich, so the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency destroyed evidence that linked certain scientists to the Third Reich while creating false political biographies for them.
Next up, we have a pretty dark conspiracy theory that no one actually wanted to be true, but ended up being true anyways. The theory that the government was using the deceased bodies of young men and women to test the effects of nuclear radiation, aka Project Sunshine. After the United States dropped nuclear explosives Little Boy and Fat Man over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nuclear war went from being some kind of far-off fantasy to a very scary reality. The problem with this was the government had very little knowledge of the effects of nuclear radiation on the human body. And so, in true corrupted official fashion, they began testing those effects on the deceased bodies of US citizens. At the time, this was kept secret from the public, but because they did put out a statement saying that they were testing the effects of radiation on human tissue, the public began speculating that they were doing, well, exactly what they were doing. All in all, they took body parts from deceased individuals belonging to somewhere around 1,500 families. The project started in 1953, but it wasn't revealed until 3 years later in 1956, after growing public concern and internal pressure forced the government to disclose.
Have any musicians ever been under government surveillance because of their politically charged music? 100%, including John Lennon, who was known for his activism and outspoken views against the Vietnam War and other political issues. The FBI was particularly concerned about Lennon's influence. He was, and still is, one of the most famous musicians of all time, and there was a real concern that his anti-war activism could rally enough opposition to the government to cause some real problems. So the FBI started spying on Lennon, collecting information on his activities, speeches, and connections to various activist groups. There was wiretapping, his mail was monitored, agents were even sent to snoop in on his friends and groups he was involved with. The FBI also compiled extensive files on Lennon and Yoko Ono. He may have been the most famous surveyed person at the time, but Lennon was far from the only person the FBI was watching.
Next up, we have the gaydar conspiracy theory, which unfortunately in the 1980s was proven to be much more than just a theory. In the 20th century, both public and political opinions of homosexuality were quite well known, and they weren't good. It was around this time that Canadians came up with the theory that their government had developed some kind of gaydar to locate and terminate the employment of homosexuals working as civil servants, as mounties, or in the military. The thing is, Canada actually did that. Believe it or not, in the 1960s they hired a university professor to create a machine that would determine sexual preference, which at the time it was believed he did successfully. The machine worked by measuring pupil dilation in relation to homosexual imagery, and it was used to terminate or exclude over 400 men from working in, for, or adjacent to the Canadian government. The existence of the machine was revealed in 1980, and in 1981 a documentary entitled The Valor and the Horror was created to showcase the gross mistreatment of the homosexual community in Canadian workforces at the time.
If I were to tell you that the Church of Scientology infiltrated 136 government organizations in the 70s, would you believe me? Because it really did happen. Operation Snow White was one of the largest infiltrations of the US government in history. It was a huge scheme cooked up by the Church of Scientology. Around 5,000 agents were sent to get into all sorts of government agencies like the IRS, the DEA, foreign embassies, even private agencies that were critical of L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. Their main target was the United States, but other countries were involved too. Their goal was to listen in on conversations using wiretaps and snatch up all these documents on the church, but the government wasn't having it, and in 1977 the FBI raided several Scientology spots with 156 agents. In 1979, Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's wife, and some other high-ranking Scientologists ended up receiving jail time.
Next up, we have the former conspiracy theory outlining the United States government's dark tactics used to deter its people from drinking during Prohibition in the 1920s. In 1927, after many reports of people getting violently ill after consuming even the tiniest amount of alcohol began to circulate, the public began coming up with theories as to why that might be. The most popular theory being that the government was somehow poisoning their supply. Of course, seeing as it's on this list, that theory did turn out to be true. In the early 1930s, the government actually admitted to having tainted a large amount of alcohol with methanol, a commonly used antifreeze, and then distributing it to the public. So the government admitted to their wrongdoings, but maybe not fully. They claimed the amount of methanol added to the alcohol wasn't enough to be lethal, just enough to deter people from drinking. However, during the time in which the tainted alcohol circulated, around 10,000 deaths were reported. Cause of death? Poisoning. Coincidence? Probably not.
In 1982, one of the worst video games in history was released, E.T. the Extraterrestrial for the Atari 2600. The game was created by Howard Scott Warshaw, who has even come out admitting to how awful the game was. He was under a really tight time constraint, completing the game in just 5 weeks. The terrible game was a total flop upon release. Not only was it bad, there was also a bit of a video game recession in 1983. Well, not long after this game came out, a story started to spread around schoolyards across the country that Atari was plagued with all these unsold ET video game cartridges. So, desperate and embarrassed, they resorted to burying them out in the middle of the New Mexico desert like they were the mob disposing of a body after a hit. It's a pretty ridiculous story. A lot of people thought it was just, youngsters exaggerating and blowing the whole thing out of proportion, but it turns out that this urban legend was actually all true. In 2015, the cartridges were even dug up and sold off, allowing all those who'd missed out on this confusing and really gaudy game in the early 80s, to give it a try for themselves.
Next up, we have the conspiracy theory that the government controls the weather, which isn't actually a conspiracy theory, but just a scientific reality. It's called cloud seeding, which is an age-old technique that uses silver iodide particles to promote rain. Basically, they send planes into the sky to shoot particles into the clouds, which causes the water droplets to get heavy, which causes it to rain. See? Science. And it's not new science either, it's actually like 60 years old. The technology was used during the Vietnam War to wash out the Ho Chi Minh Trail, making it difficult for US adversaries on the ground to maneuver around combat areas. Countries that currently use cloud seeding include the United Arab Emirates, China, and, of course, the US. While deciding when it's going to rain might seem pretty cool, there is a downside to the practice as well. Too much silver iodide can lead to flooding and pollution, which in turn could cause respiratory issues, skin issues, and gastrointestinal problems. So, if you're the government watching this, seed wisely, please.
In 1975, during a congressional testimony, it was revealed that the CIA had been working on a heart attack pistol, which is gonna sound like something out of a spy movie when I describe it, but it was, and maybe still is, very much a thing. It's a covert weapon that shoots a tiny dart capable of piercing clothing without leaving much of a mark at all, and when it hits its target, the person might not even realize it. They might just feel a little sting or nothing at all. The dart carries a deadly poison, and it all disintegrates once it's in the body, making it almost impossible to detect in an autopsy. The poison works fast, causing a heart attack soon after entering the bloodstream. All of this was revealed during a US Senate hearing in 1975. The CIA had to own up to some of their shadier activities at the time, and this heart attack weapon was one of the things they had to disclose.
And finally, we have Operation Northwoods, which never happened, but almost happened, and if it did happen, it would have been pretty messed up. In the 1960s, the United States had planned an attack on Cuba known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. On April 17th of 1961, the US attempted to carry out the invasion on Cuban soil, but were quickly thwarted by Cuba's military forces. While some members of the American brigade, known as Brigade 2506, managed to escape, almost 1,200 surrendered and more than 100 men were killed. The ordeal ended on April 20th of the same year, but conspiracy theories following the failed invasion certainly did not. US citizens began speculating that the government was planning flagship operations, attacks on their own people that they would blame on Cuba to encourage a divide between the two countries and to make themselves look better. Well, it turned out that the people were right. Operation Northwoods, while it never went ahead, was an operation in which the government had planned to stage a communist Cuban terror campaign on Miami, Florida, after which they would arrest Cuban agents and then release prepared documents substantiating Cuban involvement. Basically, they were embarrassed after losing big time to Cuba and were looking for a way to save face. Luckily, the operation never made it out of the planning stages, and it was later revealed in 2001, with officials stating that the reason it took them so long to disclose the project was simply that it was incredibly embarrassing that the idea ever gained as much traction as it did in the first place. And I agree, that is incredibly embarrassing.